The story begins with the main character learning that the plot of land he wanted to buy has been sold. Despite having his eye on this land for a long time and saving money for it for the past 3 years, he felt disappointed that he was too late. While the realtor pointed out how dirty his money was, the character asked if any other good plots were available. Unfortunately, finding a place as nice as the one he couldn't buy was quite difficult, and he only had 5 gold coins left. Frustrated, the main character was willing to purchase any piece of land no matter the condition. Even if the land didn't have a house, he was prepared to build a place to sleep and endure a challenging life for a while, as long as the realtor could help him find a place. Noticing the character's determination and indifference to the situation, the realtor agreed to help him. He revealed that he had something that was worth exactly 5 coins and was quite large. It was a forest surrounded by mountains, cliffs, and the sea, and it was quite far from town. No one had set foot there before, so it was still unexplored. Realizing that there was nothing to lose at this point, he decided to take it. He never really had any talents, and as soon as he turned 15, he was kicked out of the house. He immediately became an adventurer, simply because it seemed cool, but in reality, it wasn't as glamorous as he imagined. Most adventurers lacked real combat skills, and instead of enjoying freedom, they worked just to scrape by. He admired the high-ranking adventurers who occasionally passed through, but like everyone else, he ended up doing odd jobs and wasting his money on fleeting pleasures. There were times when he considered quitting adventuring altogether, but he knew he had no talent for being a merchant or an artisan. As things grew more difficult each day, he struggled to figure out what to do next. Then he remembered that he was the son of a farmer. If he could just get his own land, he might be able to become a successful farmer. Putting this as his goal, he managed to save up 5 golden coins after 3 years and finally had his own land. When he was heading to his land, soldiers from the kingdom of Estony stopped him, asking where he was going because there was nothing ahead other than their training facility. He explained that he bought the land over there. That place was the unexplored territory, the demonic realm, so they asked to see his adventurer card. His adventurer card was the lowest class and had never changed. The soldiers seemed surprised and worried. They advised him to learn a little survival skill in the nearby forest before entering the Devil's Nest. He thought they were making fun of him and continued his way. Arriving at the forest, he knew that the deeper parts were his land. To his surprise, it wasn't as overrun with monsters as he had feared. In fact, it was quite peaceful. Just as he was beginning to relax, a wild bear and a Vespa hornet suddenly appeared behind him. Both were incredibly strong, and he knew he wouldn't stand a chance if he attacked them directly. So he decided to wait and let them fight each other. The bear eventually killed the Vespa hornet and left it there. Seizing the opportunity, he quickly ran over to gather materials from the fallen hornet. He found arthropod eyes, feathers, and a magic stone. Every monster had a magic stone, each with its own unique properties. Monsters and demons use these stones to manipulate magic and use special abilities, while humans draw magic from nature and don't possess magic stones in their bodies. The magic stone from the hornet likely had a poison effect, but the venomous stinger that should have been in its belly was missing. Realizing that the bear might have been poisoned, he checked and found that the wild bear was also dead. He decided to take advantage of the situation by cutting the meat, skinning the fur, and drying it out a bit. His experience working at the butcher's had clearly made him more adept at this kind of work. After gathering the materials, he realized that he had made quite a good start. After spending 3 more days heading deep into the forest, he had finally arrived at his land. The river there marked the boundary of the land. The ecosystem beyond the river was clearly different. Anything was fine with him, so he decided to take the first step into this new life and started walking across the river. But when he thought he was stepping into the water, it was actually a slime. Suddenly, he started to feel lightheaded, convinced that he would pass out if he took another hit. He knew that to defeat the slime, he had to strike the core at its center. He aimed his ranged weapon at the core, but unfortunately he missed, and the weapon was completely dissolved in the process. Determined, he tried again and successfully sliced through the slime's core. However, he had to sacrifice a bear pelt to do so, making it feel like a costly victory. Still, he chose not to dwell on it, focusing instead on setting up camp before it got too dark. Looking around to find some tree branches and some leaves, he realized that this forest was full of plants he had never seen before. He found a palm leaf, cut it, and a slimy liquid came out, so it wasn't really suitable for making a tent. Bendgrass and butterbur were also not good. He ended up finding himself in the middle of a flower field. Noticing that there were monster corpses, he felt like he was in danger, so he decided to deal with that later. First, he needed to set up a camp. At night, he managed to make a fire and a small tent to sleep in. He was starving, so he was glad he got the wild bear meat. The plants and animals in this forest weren't easy. Tomorrow, he would have to start looking into things while sorting out his life. But for now, he was going to eat. Or so he thought, because something was watching him. It was a green tiger. He recalled his teacher at the Adventurer Guild telling him that if he encountered one while unarmed, he must prepare to forfeit his life. He threw him poisoned meat, but it didn't work at all. The tiger started chasing him. He threw some palm leaves while running as fast as he could. Right before the tiger bit him, it slipped on the liquid that palm leaves released and fell. Seeing his plan work, he ran away immediately. When he found a safe place, he sat down and tried to calm himself because he was terrified. He seriously thought he was going to die. For this to happen on the first day of his new life, he lost all his hope for the future. The sounds were getting louder, which meant it was getting closer to him. He can't win this fight, so he must run away to not die. While running, he planned in his head that he was going to run away, abandon this place, and go back to the village, starting over quietly. But then he realized what he was thinking. There was nothing he could do there. No one needed him in the village, and he would have to keep doing pointless jobs. He knew that running wouldn't make anything better. He had no other choice. His life was in this wasteland. After making up his head, he climbed to a tree and called the tiger. It was coming, and if his predictions were wrong, he was going to die there. But he still went ahead and made the tiger approach the flower garden. After walking around on the flowers, the tiger suddenly fainted. He was guessing that this flower garden was a natural trap, and he was right. These white, mysterious flowers probably had a strong sleep-inducing effect. Being careful not to inhale it, he collected the materials and went back to where his camp was. He was still starving, so he tried to eat the green tiger meat, but the taste was pretty gross. Laying down on the bear fur, he dreamed about eating something delicious. Life in this area was tough, but he decided to try his best just a little longer because, after all, this place was his hell. In the next scene, we see a crowded, unknown place that he was dreaming of. When he woke up, he realized that he was dreaming. He had seen this dream countless times since he was a child. While wondering where that place could be, he noticed a slime right on top of his bag. He hit the center spot of the slime without waiting and saved his bag. Judging by how easily he deflated the slime this time, he thought he might be getting stronger. Now it was time to continue exploring this hell. After all, this was his plan and he should at least know where it was. While walking, he saw a woman. She looked dead. He figured that this was a lamia because the upper body was a woman's while the torso was that of a snake. They are usually quite strong, but she seemed pretty drained. He opened her mouth and there was a poisoned stinger of a Vespa hornet there. He realized that she had eaten the meat that he had thrown at the green tiger yesterday with the poison needles. He took out the magic stone of Lamia and continued venturing deeper into the Suimin grass. On his way, he found some mushrooms, but he didn't know if they were edible. He decided not to approach the plants in this hell without thinking first. After that, he caught a green-colored rat, but the rat slipped from his hands and ran towards the mushrooms. The moment it touched the mushrooms, it looked like it was hit by lightning and fell. He realized that this was another natural trap. He then noticed that traps were the only way to survive in this forest full of monsters. He regained his hope of surviving and started digging a hole. After deciding that it was enough, he placed the sunflower and mushroom in the hole. The last step was to cover it with bushes and it was done. He decided to call it a day because he was starving. He sleeps while hoping to catch something big tomorrow. When he woke up, the first thing he did was to check the hole. Shockingly, there was a giant boar that couldn't even fit its head into the hole. It was way too big and he was scared. He decided to kill it first. After that, he realized that butchering this animal was going to take a whole day. Inside his stomach, there was a blue snake. Finally, when the sky got darker, he finished gathering the materials from the boar. After that, he immediately cooked the meat and started eating with excitement and happiness. While eating, he realized that both the axe and knife he brought had completely dulled. He noticed that the bones looked sturdy, so he tried to use them. After working on the bone for a while, he made a proper, easy-to-handle but pretty heavy sword. Next was the axe. Once the tree sap solidifies, it should become as hard as a stone, and then he was planning to pour it into a mold he made of clay. He was pretty satisfied with the wild boar bone sword and a tree sap axe he made. He didn't even realize until then that it was already morning. While he was at it, he decided to make another trap. He realized that he finished the trap a lot quicker than yesterday. He started to wonder if he was getting stronger, or if it was just because he had done that before. He guessed that it might be because all the meat he ate gave him more strength. But he didn't know if that was how he was now. No matter what he did, he couldn't get stronger before, and now he was getting better every day. The next day, he found a cave. There was a wall torch inside it, so there might be someone living there. He started going further inside the cave and saw tables and stuff. It seemed deserted. There were traces of someone living here in the past, but he wasn't sure if they were still there. He continued and encountered a skeleton holding a book and sitting in a chair. He hesitated to touch the skeleton but was curious to read the book, so he did it anyway. The book was a diary. There were records of monsters, edible plants, and medicinal herbs. There was vital information for survival. He also saw something that he didn't understand. It was written that the guards of the ruins seemed to be fighting something. He didn't know there were ruins in the demonic realm. They didn't include any specifics, so he didn't get enough information. It was also filled with lots of random information, such as a monster that appears every 3 months, mastery of space-time magic, and ancient magic circles. It was confirmed that a man named PJ was researching this place, but he was having a hard time understanding. The writer stated that his only regret was that he was unable to solve the mystery of these lands. After that, he buried the man and prayed in his grave. The warehouse was filled with unfamiliar metals, knives, and armor that he made himself. He seemed like a quite skilled adventurer. This made him wonder about how he died. As much as he was curious about something would just have to remain a mystery. First, he should be glad that he found this cave. The cave interior seemed untouched and might be a relatively safe place. Without thinking any longer, he decided to move there. The idea of making a home around the cave as a base made him realize that this might eventually become a beautiful place. His dreams for this place were expanding. He decided to tidy up this messy room first. Next, he was going to repair what was salvageable and make what was missing with the available materials. He was pretty satisfied with the result. There was no one to welcome him, but being free from any troublesome human relationships suits him just fine. In the next scene, 2 soldiers encounter a wild bear in the forest. A wild bear couldn't appear in that area, so they were quite shocked. But the captain stated that if they don't defeat it here, it might head towards the main road. Suddenly, a man with a hood appeared in the middle of them and wanted to help them. They asked who he was, and he said that in this cursed land, even strong people like them cannot take a wild bear. Dodging its powerful attacks, avoiding its tough skull, and targeting the relatively softer parts, he was able to finish it off. His hood opened, revealing his face, and it was our main character. He asked if they were from the training facility. They were, but they were still confused as to who he was. He didn't answer their questions and asked if they had any seeds for wheat or vegetables. He wanted to exchange them for monster meat or magic stones. He said that if he returned to the facility, he would find some. That made him pretty happy, and he mentioned that he would also like to exchange them for charcoal and paper. After the trading was done, he had lots of new stuff. He was quite used to living in this cursed land, but there were still many places he hadn't been to, so he wanted to make some maps. He then realized that the soldier seemed quite surprised. Even he didn't know how or when he became so strong. He was guessing that living in this cursed land surrounded by tough enemies, he was forced to become stronger. When he looked at his reflection on the river, he realized that he hadn't bathed in a while because of hunting. Feeling refreshed and clean, he returned to his base. Now that he has some vegetable seeds, it might be time to start serious farming. He started working on the soil, but then got interrupted by an enormous turtle. He tried to stop it from messing up the farm, but the turtle threw him into the mud. But he didn't give up and he started running at him. Luckily, the turtle got distracted and slipped. It got caught in the swamp and fell. He finished it off and cooked its meat right away. The meat was delicious, but the soup made from it was irresistible. He then noticed that there was a note about turtles in PJ's notebook. Its name was Hayes Turtle, and once caught, it could become a pet. It was considered very weak in the cursed land. The next day, he decided to explore the sea. He made a lot of meat and he was almost out of salt. He was also drawing maps. Searching for a river from the top of the hill, if he followed the river, he assumed he might find the sea. And he was right. Even in the cursed land, there was a proper end. After finishing drawing the sea, he decided to start by getting some salt from the seawater. He then noticed a human lying on the floor. But when he approached her, he realized that it wasn't a human. He didn't know if it would be bad to get involved in this, but he then realized that this was his territory. Not only trespassers, but he would also have to deal with demons too. He decided to act like he didn't see anything and started making salt. However, he wasn't the type of person to just ignore a person who needed help, so he gathered some medical herbs. The forest rat's food tasted terrible, but it restored energy. After making her drink the medicine, he decided that he did everything he could do. The sun was setting already, so he decided to find food. Today's dinner was grilled giza crab. While eating with a big appetite, the girl he healed woke up and approached him from behind. She started staring at the crab, so he asked if she would like to eat. She nodded her head and started eating. While eating, he told her that he didn't know where she came from, and that this demonic realm was his land. He asked her if she could leave if he ate some food. She said something that made him realize that she didn't understand him. Suddenly, she pointed at him and called him Makio. He said that this wasn't his name, but even correcting her was too troublesome, so he decided to go along with her and accepted that his name was Makio. He asked her name and she said Cher. She seemed like she was still hungry, but there was only one left. He asked how she got there and wondered how he could explain that. She started drawing things and drew lots of images that he didn't understand most of. There seemed to be a conflict among the demons and she escaped. She then wondered what he was doing, and he explained that he was boiling seawater to make salt. She then created a flame ball to help him boil the water quicker, but ended up burning it. Now that it was getting pretty late, she seemed willing to tend the fire for him while he slept. While trying to sleep, he realized that this was getting strange. If she was planning to stay in the demon realm like that, he thought maybe she could teach him magic as rent. The next morning, he woke up with Cher hugging him from behind. When he checked the pot, there was a lot of salt, and this made him realize that things get done faster with two people. He woke her up because it was time to go home. He told her to come to his house with him. Eventually, he would have her build a boat and send her back. But for now, he decided to let her stay at his place for a while. While walking, she was saying the word frog a lot. He realized that she didn't have much energy, and she couldn't even fight with a slime. Watching her reminded him of his old self a bit. When they arrived at the cave, she seemed pretty amazed. She then started to say she was home, but Makio corrected her that this was his house. He started to explain the things she seemed interested in, such as the fireplace, the forest rat, and his armor. She then ended up sleeping in his stop. He brought her here on a whim, thinking she might be useful, but there was a possibility that she might just be a burden. And besides, if it was suspected that he was harboring demons, he would definitely be arrested. He decided to send her back once she woke up, but Makio realized that there was no need to wait until tomorrow morning. He decided to wake her up now and explain everything properly. When he was about to do that, he realized that she was crying in her sleep while mumbling some words. He realized that she was in the same situation as him. She had no place to return to. He changed his mind and just covered her with a blanket. With this strange encounter, the peculiar life in the cursed land with a human and a demon began. In the next scene, Cher and Makio go hunting. However, Cher had no stamina to make it in this demon land. She was so much of a burden to him that he couldn't even explore properly. After thinking it through, he decided to train her. First things first, he told her to try to catch as many forest rats around here as she could. Even though Cher tried her best and injured literally every part of her body, all she got was nothing but the tail of the rat. The next step was combat training. She did have magic power, but there was no reason for her to shoot such a huge fireball at a little monkey. He told her to aim properly and not close her eyes while shooting. When she shot once again, she almost blew him up. Thankfully, after many tries, she was able to hit it. It irritated him to see her so proud of herself as if she wasn't blowing him up. It took until sunset just to get one emerald monkey, so the future looked bleak to Makio. It didn't seem worthy of constantly being on the ground. While resting by the fire, Makio wanted Cher to teach him magic. She started saying things and held his hand. Something started flowing from Cher's hands to him, and something from him was flowing into Cher. That was the magic power. Something felt really strange. The calm and peaceful expression on Cher's face disappeared, and she started pushing his hands and getting angry at him. Makio was confused. She started drawing on the sand. She was trying to say that his magic power was high, yet he didn't use magic, which was a waste. Makio thought about when he might get this much magic power. It might be because he trained and grew stronger in the demon land. He didn't pay attention because he didn't use magic in combat, as he said. He then remembered that he could at least use basic life magic. Seeing a sparkle of magic coming out of his finger, Cher let out a big breath. She tried to say that magic was all about visualization. He responded that even though she said that it wasn't like he could do anything with visualization, he can't just create a naked woman with magic. Thinking about visualization, he tried once again and created a small fire. He started to understand the flow of magic now, even though it was small. It wasn't suitable for combat at all. In the next scene, they were going to defeat as many monsters as possible while training and heading back. He suggested taking the cliff route, but she seemed uneasy about it. He asked why she wouldn't just fly with wind magic. Apparently it was hard to control magic power, so she would have to climb on her own. She called his name, which he thought was for something unnecessary, but it was actually because a big moth was chasing her. He told her to try defeating him alone. She stayed calm and attacked it, but it didn't work, and she was attacked by paralysis powder. By using one stick, Makio defeated the moth. She didn't seem okay, but she asked him to give her the magic stone from the big moth. When he did, he saw that she was trying to make a magic stone branch. To help her, he made it for her and gave it to her. This was a big hit because Cher's triumphant march had begun from there. She started beating the monsters pretty easily, using a combination of paralysis magic and attack magic. For the next few days, they hunted monsters with the paralysis combo. The more they got used to the demon land, the more their movements changed. He was particularly happy that they had been moving faster. Meanwhile, his magic takes time to activate due to visualization. As they were wandering in the forest, Cher pointed somewhere. He explained that those were imps in a group. She started running at them, but he warned her to back off because there were many of them. However, she still gave it a try and killed all of them with ease. Before they could celebrate her win, the tree that they were standing on started to talk, and it did not seem so friendly. Apparently, this was a treat. Even though Cher attacked it with a fireball, it didn't have any effect on the tree. Makio grabbed her and started to run away because they were not opponents they could beat. The tree used its roots to chase them, and it was pretty fast. Cher started saying things again, and Makyo realized that the paralysis was taking effect. He told her to stay awake, but she was already sleeping. Even if it was just one step, Makyo tried his best to run. When he was thinking about that, he made one step, but that step was so strong that he started flying and they found themselves on top of a hill. Looking back to the place they came from, the tree turned its back and left. He asked Cher if that was her magic, but she was definite that it wasn't hers. She pointed at him and he understood that he used some kind of magic. At that moment, he remembered that he had seen the dream he had always had since he was a child. It was a mysterious board that appeared in his dreams. Through that board, he felt like he had learned various images of magic. Cher started using recovery magic to heal the wounds in his head. He thanked her and asked how she did the recovery magic. She tried to say something again, but once again Makyo had no idea what she meant. In the next scene, Makyo is practicing magic again. He thought maybe he could use something like a magic sword, but a knife made of coconut resin was totally useless. He tried various demon materials like the hell beetle's horns and the front leg of pincers, but nothing seemed to fit quite right. While practicing, Cher came and informed him that the food was ready. He was trying to gather the magic in his fist and then punch the floor, creating a huge hole. Cher was pretty amazed that she started making weird noises. He realized that he might have made an incredible discovery just now. They went home and he looked at the food Cher had prepared. It was uncooked meat. He decided to make something proper and he made delicious bread. Having extra hands was actually helpful since there was a lot to do, such as making maps of the fields. But eventually, he knew he would have to send Cher back to where she came from. The next day, he decided to just chop some wood together. He said that they were going to build a ship so they could send her home whenever she wanted. This wasn't as easy as it sounded because they didn't have the proper weapons instead of resin. He then realized that they could enchant the mysterious metal weapons PJ had and use them to cut down the trees. When he carried out his plan, the results were disappointing. Things didn't turn out as well as he had hoped. The magic conductivity was too high, making PJ's belongings too dangerous to use carelessly. Although they had managed to gather plenty of materials for the ship with just one swing, the wood wasn't shaping up properly. This might have been because it was still wet, and there was nothing he could do until it dried out. So he decided to spend his time practicing infusing magic into different parts of his body, while Cher went out hunting. They spent the day like that, and Cher brought him some bread. As he ate, Makyo realized that his life wasn't so bad. He was eating when he was hungry and sleeping when he was tired. The next morning he was jolted awake by a loud noise and an unusual chill. To his shock, he discovered that he and Cher were literally being carried away by a giant wyvern, hundreds of meters above the ground. The first attack was from Cher. Knowing that there was no choice, Makyo also started attacking. He infused his fist with earth magic and punched its head, making him fall. Before crashing into the ground, Makyo used wind magic on his leg to prevent injuries. He was worried about Cher, but luckily she used water magic to encase herself. But she ended up drowning. He gave her first aid and removed the water that had entered her body. The sun was setting and they were in a rock area with nothing but stones and sand without any belongings. They entered a cave to spend the night because there was a sandstorm. The next day, Cher got sick. She had a high fever. Makyo doubted there was medicine in a place like that, so he started brainstorming about what to do. He remembered PJ's book and started checking, hoping to find something useful. He found a demon that had a cold medicine magic stone. The imps were with the Trent, which meant they were in the marshlands. That was quite far north from where they were. He made a canopy from the wyvern membrane to keep her away from the sun. Infusing magic into his legs, he started running to find imps. Soon after, he found what he was looking for. He slashed them one by one and immediately looked for their magic stone. While looking, Trent came. He totally forgot about that. The battle started, but this time Makyo had no time, so he was pretty mad and just wanted to get this over with. He punched the Trent countless times and managed to come back in one piece. He gave her the demon stone, and when she used it, something black came out of her body. He figured that it was the cold that was leaving her body. When he asked if it worked, Cher's eyes were sparkling and she looked pretty healthy. She started leaning on him to express her gratitude, and they started walking like that to their home. Meanwhile, at the border of the demon land, an adventurer team entered Makyo's area. In the next scene, Makyo was planning to do some work in the field today. While thinking about using magic to draw water to the fields, Cher informed him that there were people there. From the bushes, they started to observe them. A slime approached them, and even with those swords and armor, they were struggling to beat it. Watching them have a hard time even with the weakest monsters, Cher got sleepy, and Makyo was bored. Using effective fire magic as bait and resorting to brute force with low effectiveness was a chaotic tactic, even though they couldn't even aim for the core. After 5 minutes, they were completely exhausted and half the party was running out of magic. Makyo decided to say something as the landlord. He approached them and asked what they were doing there. The men who looked like the leader introduced themselves as the White Lightning Adventurer Party, and they came to this land seeking battles with strong monsters. He even showed his adventure card with a proud face. Makyo, who was unbothered by his ego, stated that this was private property so they couldn't enter without permission, and it would be troublesome if they got hurt. The man took this as an insult and reminded him that they were a renowned party even in the city. Makyo couldn't care less about them and stated that if they were struggling with slimes, it was better not to go deeper. A pseudo-dragon appeared as if it were trying to prove Makyo's point. The adventurer team freaked out and immediately ran away for their lives, but they forgot the cleric woman who was lying there unconscious. Makyo had an idea. He was thinking of taking the accumulated trade goods to the training facility, so he might as well leave that female cleric there too. He also asked Cher if they should go together, and she was so happy. But she needed to make sure to cover his horns so they didn't notice her. Makyo packed everything, including the woman, and was ready to go. Once again infusing the magic into his legs, they departed. At the trading facility, he arrived at the trade shop. The man seemed to know him, but he had never seen Cher before. Makyo said that she was a bit odd, but her skills were reliable. With her, they could make double the usual amount in their deals. Makyo then showed the girl who collapsed in the demon land and asked if he could also take her. Things seemed to be getting quite interesting. They went inside and he started looking at the things he brought. He was pretty impressed by the sword he made with the green tiger fang. Makyo mentioned that he tried making a staff using magic stones. The man was not sure, but it was a decent product. This time Makyo wanted to get some metal swords, sewing tools, and woodworking tools. He also wanted a few sets of women's clothing. Last but not least, he wanted a spellbook in space-time magic. The man wasn't even sure if such a thing existed, and even if it did, it would be expensive for sure. He asked if he could order it from the capital city, but the man explained that there were many counterfeit spellbooks for expensive ones, so it might be safer to go to the capital city and look it up for himself. This made sense, and he decided to search for the spellbook himself. As for the clothes, the man promised to have them sent over in a week. The next day, Makyo decided to search for the ruins said to be in the demon land mentioned in PJ's notebook. The treasures of ruins were a man's romance, but crucially, the location of the ruins wasn't written. As Makyo thought more, he realized that he didn't even grasp the overall map of the demon land. The west was the entrance to the demon land, and the east was the sea where Cher was. The north was mountains and wilderness, and the south was unexplored. After checking the locations, Makyo and Cher decided to head south and check it out. On their way to the south, they encountered a couple of monsters. As soon as Makyo got out of the forest, there was suddenly a desert. He thought that as far as the eye could see, there should have been nothing, so he wondered if he missed the mark. Suddenly, a huge monster emerged from the sand. According to the notebook, it was a sandworm that was large but belonged to the weaker category of monsters. Makyo took out his sword and started to run around while his sword stuck in its skin. However, not even the magic sword was effective at all. They were just trying to run away. When they arrived at the end of the desert, they entered a forest and rested there as they were out of breath. Makyo wondered where its weakness was and how strong PJ was. They decided to search for the notebook for any means of defense. Makyo had found something in the notebook, a weapon that was decisively different from his. He drew the magic circle exactly as it appeared and tried flowing magic power through it. When he finished drawing, it created an explosion. He tried another magic circle, and this time it was cutting through space. Upon closer inspection, all of PJ's weapons had magic circles incorporated into them. Moreover, they were seamlessly integrated into the decoration, making them not immediately noticeable. Makyo never stopped wondering who he was or what he was. He was sure that he was a skilled craftsman, but questioned why such a person would have died alone in Demonland, as he had no clue. Cher made fun of him and called him an idiot. The next morning, Makyo was going to seek revenge on the desert with PJ's sword, but before that, he wanted to head to the river to fetch some water. When they arrived at the river, Cher saw the cleric standing right in the middle of the river. She showed her to Makyo. He asked her if she needed something. She said she had left the White Lightning. Her name was Jennifer Volkov, and she requested that they let her live there. Makyo refused her request, but she had no intention to leave there. Jennifer told him that as a former cleric, she should have been useful for injuries and illnesses. Besides, she said she managed consumables at the party, and then again she wanted them to take her in. Makyo insisted on his refusal and told her he was fine. She said she was from the north and could handle the cold, so she again wanted him to take her in. Makyo asked her if it could have been that she hadn't left but had been fired from the party. Jennifer responded with an embarrassed face, saying that it wasn't his business. Makyo said that this was his land, and without knowing the circumstances, he didn't want to let her live there. Jennifer started to cry and said her companions told her she was no longer needed, so she had to live there. Makyo thought that he wasn't clear and asked Jennifer the reason why she didn't go back home. She said she had no home to return to as she was an orphan. Either way, Makyo said she couldn't live there and it was better to go to a safe place than that demon land. She talked back to him and said that place was the one she had been searching for, where no one would betray her. For her, it was an ideal, wonderful land with no one around. Makio told her that he was still there and it was his land. She was indifferent to what he was saying and asked him to guide her to a house at least. He asked her if she even listened to what he had said. In the next scene, Makio told her that if she was going to stay there, she had to pay rent. Besides, she was told not to make a fuss about everything she saw in the demon land. She was okay with all that and said she had made sure to secure some money. Finally, Makio told her to be careful of monsters, but as soon as he told her, she was attacked by a slime. She was all in shock and fell to the ground. She couldn't even move. At home, Makio thought it would have been troublesome if she died and turned into a monster. He would have let her stay for a bit and then sent her off. Jennifer saw a demon, panicked, and immediately called out to Makio. He looked at her with disappointment and asked her if she hadn't promised not to make a fuss about what she saw there. Then Cher came in there with some meal, and while Makio was eating it, he decided to go water the fields. Jennifer asked him if it wasn't dangerous as there was a demon there. Makio told her that Cher was a fool but a good person, and told her to treat her with respect and get along. However, Jennifer said she was an enemy and if she were found, she would have been taken to the guards. He responded that this was over 100 years ago, and asked her if the church taught her to persecute innocent people. Cher taught him magic as payment for rent and he had gotten pretty good at it. He told her if she couldn't pay the rent, she would have to leave. Jennifer said she had 10 coins for a month's stay, which was fine with him. She gave him a check, but he was expecting gold coins. However, it was worth 10 gold coins, as she said. Makio didn't accept her check. She said it was normal in the capital, and if he took that to a money changer, they would exchange it for gold coins in an arrogant way. Makio simply responded that they were not in the capital and no money changers came there. She got angry, and as a last resort she was going to work and do anything at that point. She was determined to become the best in that hellish place, and then she got revenge on them. Makio was taken aback when Jennifer suddenly became angry and sought revenge. He calmly told her that this demon land wasn't the right place for someone like her and advised her to leave. Jennifer, confused, asked if she had said something wrong. Makio responded by saying that he understood why she had been expelled from her party. It was because she didn't listen to others and got angry when things didn't go her way. He warned her that in this harsh land things would rarely go as she wished, and the demon land was far from easy. Angry, Jennifer turned her back and began to leave. Makio then told Cher that Jennifer had come there seeking revenge, but there was no place for someone like that in the demon land. He believed she would be better off in the capital. The next day, Makio decided to continue exploring the desert and remembered to take PJ's sword. Since they would likely lose their bearings in the desert, he had caught an essential creature for their return, which was in the bag of Cher. It was a leaf bird that had a strong homing instinct and fell asleep quickly in the dark. On their way, Cher saw something on the edge of the cliff and asked Makio what it was. Jennifer was lying on the ground, injured. Makio immediately checked her. She was breathing, but her leg was broken. He asked Cher if he should have let her stay another night, and she agreed. Makio had laid her down neatly and had healed her wounds with recovery magic, so she should have been okay for now. He didn't want to delay the desert exploration any longer, so he would head to the desert as planned. He thought she would probably leave on her own when she woke up. When they arrived at the desert, they again encountered the sandworm. Makio knew he needed to take care of it, or he couldn't explore in peace. He was counting on PJ's sword. He was right to count on the sword because he managed to chop off the worm in an instant, leaving Cher shocked and amazed. The desert monsters were generally considered weak, but according to Makio, this standard wasn't very reliable. What was concerning was that the note said never touch poisonous plants, but there weren't any plants. They started to explore the desert and found an island floating in the sky with chains. Makio thought it was the ruins mentioned in PJ's notebook and decided to go there. As they got closer, they saw the chain was huge and didn't even know what it was made of. Makio decided to aim for that island and climb. Even though Makio trained quite a bit in the demon land, it was really hard. He looked at Cher and told her to use magic to make it easier, and she got repelled. He tried it too, but the chain repelled him, so he gave up. Coating himself in magic, he could stick to the chain and climb, but the chain absorbed his magic. This method would quickly drain his magic and leave him helpless. He wondered who made something like that. There were many mysteries, but for now, he had to climb. They were almost there, utterly exhausted, both out of breath and drained. When they finally reached a town, they began to wander around. The town showed signs of a once thriving cultural life. Houses and furniture still stood, but the place felt more like a collection of ruins. Oddly, there were no human bones or signs of conflict. The entire island appeared to be uninhabited. Curious if the inhabitants had simply vanished without a trace, Makio continued to explore the island with Cher by his side. During their exploration, they stumbled upon a grand and majestic grave, where Peter Jefferson was laid to rest. Makio was stunned to discover PJ's grave, raising a disturbing question. If this was PJ's final resting place, Then who was the skeleton they found in that cave earlier? Cher was just as puzzled, with no answers to offer. As the sun began to set, Makio suggested they camp there for the night, realizing that the mystery of the island had only deepened. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped significantly, and Makio began to shiver from the cold. He noted that the high altitude was likely to blame for the chilly air. He asked Cher if they could huddle together for warmth. Without a moment's hesitation, Cher stood up and wrapped her arms around him tightly. Surprised by her sudden closeness, Makio asked her to stop, but she refused, continuing to hold him close to keep them both warm. The next day, they decided to return to the cave because there were no more discoveries on the floating island in the sky. Cher was exhausted and Makio was covered in sand all over. He thought about heating some water and taking a bath later. They started eating, and then Makio noticed that Jennifer was still there, and her condition seemed to get a lot worse. There was a terrible wound in her hand. Cher healed her until she woke up, and Makio asked why she was still there. Jennifer explained that the moment she entered the forest, both monsters and plants attacked her, and she lost her sense of direction. Makio was sure she was completely dejected. He asked if she could at least use healing magic as a cleric herself, but she said that she used too much and ran out of magic power. Makio didn't say anything else and went to bed. He told her to keep the fire going while he slept. She should have done some work for once because she had been eating their food without permission. The next morning, Makio was shocked to see her still sitting next to the fire, wide awake. She said that she couldn't do anything since coming to this demon land, and couldn't even manage to go back. Makio gave her the paralysis staff. He said that if she paralyzed the monsters, she should be able to make it to the stream at the entrance. Jennifer looked at the staff, reached to grab it, but then started begging him to allow her to stay there for a while and promised to pay for the lodging. She said that she realized her own weakness in this and was fully aware of her shortcomings, but if she left without doing anything, nothing would change. He asked what happened to the talk about getting revenge on the comrades who banished her. She said that she was abandoned by her parents and became a cleric in the first place. But even the sister at the church told her to live freely, and she was kicked out with those words. Following that advice, she became an adventurer, but as he knew, she was also banished from there. Revenge was just an excuse she came up with. The reality was that no one needed her, and her unwillingness to acknowledge her own weakness. Makio asked what her purpose was in this demon land, and she responded that it was them. They live freely in this harsh mystic realm without needing to be needed by anyone, which she found amazing. She bowed to him and once again asked him to teach her about adventuring. Makio was shocked and explained that he was not on an adventure. He just went to the desert because he wanted to know what was in his land. He told her that if she wanted to do it, she had to do it alone. She seemed fine with that idea and then turned to Cher, asking her to teach her how to bake bread. She then asked if she could use the empty space there as her bed. Makio wondered where he had done wrong. She then took out something and gave it to him as a payment for now. She said that she got it from the only opponent she defeated in Demonland, a female zombie, and just like that, Jennifer ended up staying with them, leaving him somewhat unsettled. The next day, while Makio was making a staff to trade at the training facility, Jennifer came. When he said that the staff was poorly made, more like a freebie, she corrected him and said that this wasn't true. As a debuffer, it was a very excellent weapon and it was definitely not cheap, as she states. Makio seemed touched by the compliments she gave. Jennifer stayed at home while Cher and Makio went to the training facility. Cher asked what Jennifer was about, and he said that she wasn't leaving. When she asked the reason, he explained that she wanted to have adventures and decided to stay on her own. She said that she was just like herself. Makio realized that they both pushed their way in. The trade shop owner stated that the staff he brought before sold for a high price and there were even requests to make more. And even though it wasn't about the time or space, the man was able to find a magic book. It was a beginner's textbook. It only had basic magic effects and magic circles, but it was still useful to understand the system. He decided to take that and trade it. That day, he also got tools for shipbuilding and women's clothing. Back in his house, he started reading the book. He could roughly categorize the magic circles drawn on PJ's weapons into fire, water, earth, and wind systems, but most of the magic circles were unidentifiable. For future reference, he decided to copy the magic circles onto paper. Jennifer noticed that he kept reading books, and asked if he was planning to defeat monsters. He told her to go ahead if she wanted to defeat them. They were each different adventurers after all. She had nothing to say but to agree, so she thanked him for the clothes. Makio didn't seem bothered and said it was just on his way. Meanwhile, there was a mysterious person in the demon land. In the next chapter, Cher enters the cave covered in blood. She explained that the blood wasn't hers, it was from the haze turtle. She then took out something and asked if he knew what this could be. It didn't look like a normal stone and it had lightning patterns on it. This was man-made, but nothing happens when he tries to infuse it with magic. He started flipping the new book he bought and noticed that there were similar lightning patterns on the ruins depicted in the ancient book. He asked where she found it, and she replied that she found it in the swamp while trying to teach Jennifer how to swim. There might be ruins buried within the swamp, so he decided to go and investigate. He took out his clothes and enchanted his arm with light magic. When he got under the water, he encountered lots of different fish, including a huge shark monster. He managed to injure the shark with a strong punch, but dealing with it was going to be a hassle, so he decided to use magic to create a current and dive straight down. But the current stirred up the mud at the bottom and blocked his view. It was time for another plan, so he was going to keep creating currents to dig up the mud at the bottom, as there might be ruins under it. When he got off the water, they asked if he had found anything. Jennifer noticed that the surface of the water was very murky. Makio explained that he tried digging at the bottom because there might be some ruins, and decided to dive in again once the water cleared up. Just then, the mysterious girl appeared in front of them. Makio greeted him calmly and asked if she had any business on this land. The girl responded that she wanted to see the people on this land, so that's why she came. Suddenly, a slime appeared and attacked her. Cher was worried that she might drown at this rate, so Makio thought about helping her, but then realized that it would be easier to help after she actually started drowning. When it was time, he jumped and saved her. But the thing is, he hadn't realized that she was a woman because of her hoods and clothes. He said that he didn't mind selling them, but she had to have something valuable to trade because he didn't need money. She excitedly told him to look in her backpack to see if there was anything he would like to trade. Makio found a history book and asked whose history it was. She responded that it should be about the history of this place. It talked about floating islands and monsters taller than mountains. She commented that the author's imagination was quite wild, but Makio knew this might be true. He decided to trade her 1 wand for 10 history books like that. She seemed happy with this trade. He told her that he would just take this book, and the next time she visited, he would prepare 10 wands for her. She started panicking because it was too disadvantageous for her, as she didn't know when she would come back. That was true. He asked if she didn't keep a secret he was about to tell, the deal would be off. He showed her Cher to scare her and told her not to speak a word about what she saw there on this land. When she promised to do that, they brought her to their cave. Makio told Jennifer to check if there was anything they could trade outside and Cher to choose magic stones and make the wands for them. While they were working on them, Makio asked why she needed the wands. She said that west of here, bandits seemed to have revolted and they needed powerful weapons to suppress them. That sounded profitable to Makio. Jennifer whispered to Makio that her items were of too high quality and that she wouldn't be able to find such things unless she attacked a noble's carriage or something like that. Makio immediately assumed that she was a thief. Jennifer agreed, but she felt like she had seen her somewhere before. Makio asked if a high-ranking adventurer had turned into a thief, but even if she was a child, he would still trade with her. Hearing them talk like that, she told them that she wasn't a thief. Makio asked where she got those items and if she didn't steal them. She said that she was a noble from East Kenya. Her uncle, the Lord, ordered her to purchase some weapons, so she came there. After that, Jennifer remembered where she had seen her. She said that East Kenya was the nearest place to this land. Most people think this land was part of East Kenya's territory, but it wasn't. After hearing that Makio told her that she should flee, she told him that the citizens of East Kenya didn't have any option but to flee. Jennifer informed Makio that East Kenya was close to the land of elves, and they were known for their bravery and recklessness. In other words, they were savages. Makio then asked if her uncle sent her away under the guise of buying weapons to get her to safety. She refused that claim because she was the best female warrior in East Kenya. Makio didn't ask anything else and decided to just make the trade. Before she left, he reminded her to not mention anything about this place. After that, they resumed investigating the swamp and discovered the bones of a giant creature. But that day, nothing significant within the ruins was found. The next day, he decided to read. The history book said that this land was used to be a country, but people suddenly disappeared in large numbers without any warning. It talked about the floating island that was eaten by a gigantic beast, and there was a religion where deer were considered to be messengers of God. It also mentioned that the territory has natural disasters constantly, which made him wonder if that cave was a shelter. What concerned him the most was East Kenya, where that woman was from. East Kenya was a fertile land that was often plagued by rebellions and wars. She said that the adventurers caused an internal conflict, which looked like it was going to be a hassle. It was clear that another storm was coming. In the next scene, Makio is at the training facility to discuss what he learned yesterday. He told the captain of the training facility that a female warrior from the nobility came and said that there was a rebellion in a nearby territory. The captain heard about the adventurers' rebellion, but this place was in such a remote area. He told them that the rebellion had probably been suppressed, and that it wasn't something they needed to worry about. Hearing that, Makio realized that he might be worrying too much about that. While they were going back, it started raining. They managed to move during the rain, but it was indeed terrible. When they got back to the cave, Jennifer was taking care of the staff. They needed to put sandbags at the entrance of the cave. She told him that the cave was safe for now, but if it continued to rain like this, the fields would be ruined. Makio decided to go and check. The water level was rising, and at that rate, it was going to flood. He used magic to make the water flow into the ground and return to the cave. He informed the girls that although he protected the fields, the surrounding area got flooded, and it was becoming difficult to expand the fields. That meant they would have to get vegetables and wheat through trade for a while. Rain continued to pour down heavily on that day, and the next day, it intensified even more. Cher informed them that a hurricane was coming. Since they can't go outside, Makio wondered if they could craft some homemade traps using PJ's magic circle. He told the girls that he was going to carve the explosion trap magic on a suitable wooden board and make the carving incomplete by removing one line so it wouldn't explode instantly. If they set it under dead leaves, it should be able to blow off at least a leg of a large monster. Suddenly, he heard an explosion and the girls called him outside. They were not expecting a literal mountain drop right in front of them. More shockingly, that mountain was moving. The mountain was causing thunderstorms and strong winds to gather around it. Makio remembered that this thing was the magical beast that was mentioned in PJ's notebook, and it only appears once every 3 months. He had no idea where such a huge thing had been until now. It started throwing the big monsters around. They were all being lifted by the tornado and killed instantly by lightning. Part of the cave had also collapsed. If they stay inside, they might get buried alive. It looked like monsters were fleeing to the north. He decided to follow them and flee to the north too. He told Cher to cast magic on her legs, and Jennifer to tie herself up with a rope so she wouldn't fall off. They were ready in a second and started running away. They didn't stop until they made it to the wasteland. Everything around them made it look like the end of the world to Makio. The wasteland was also no good, so he decided to go back to the forest for now. While using their last strength to find a place to hide, they ended up falling into a hole. He looked around and realized that they were in an old well, or the ruins of people who once lived in the demonic realm. He then noticed that his leg was broken. Jennifer untied the rope and stood up. Makio was relieved because at least they could take shelter from the wind and rain. Cher gathered some bushes and wood sticks and created a fire. Even though they had reached the wasteland, they could still hear its footsteps. Jennifer apologized for being a burden and said she thought she was going to die. But it was a little bit early to say that because they were still not safe. Makio fell asleep from exhaustion. After a while, Jennifer woke him up. His foot was healed by Jennifer's healing magic. Cher pointed at somewhere and said, "Here." They started walking towards the dark, and apparently it was a passageway. He wondered if it was connected to an underground vein. The place they encountered was very beautiful, but Makio still warned them not to touch it carelessly. There was also an underground lake, but it was too dark to see clearly. Cher found a thunderstone. Makio was pretty shocked and asked where she found it. She said that a skeleton was holding it. A mummy was sitting there. He checked to see if there was anything else and found a book. It looked like a beginner's adventurer's guidebook with an old design. There was a drawing of the stone inside the book, and it said to not lose the dungeon key. Makio had never been to a dungeon, so he was confused. Jennifer had a dungeon experience and mentioned that they were known as the party that ventured into the deepest part of the capital city. There was something written on the last page. It said that if the dungeon was stolen by a magical beast, then it was over. This statement leaves a question mark on their heads. Makio asked if a dungeon could even be stolen. Cher didn't think it was possible, and they agreed. It looked like the presence of that giant magical beast was gone, so they decided to get out of there. Makio jumped, using his magic, and slid a rope to help them climb the well. The weather was clear now, and it looked like the beast had left. But it left the forest in such terrible shape. He wondered if the landscape had changed. They decided to head back home, and on their way, they encountered countless monster crops. The girls were getting hungry, and this made him realize that he hadn't eaten anything since yesterday. But even though the monsters were the corpses of magical creatures, he didn't feel like eating them. He told them to eat some camu seeds or something like that and try to endure the hunger for now. When they arrived at the cave, the room was filled with stones and rubble, and they couldn't use the wheat as well. Jennifer suggested cleaning the place up and making it habitable first. At sunset, they managed to make enough space for 3 adults to sleep. Cher immediately collapsed and started sleeping. Jennifer was also at her limit. Makio wanted to take a bath, but he felt so drowsy. Suddenly, he felt something moving in his pocket. It was the gold coin he got from Jennifer. It was throbbing like a heartbeat. It slipped from his hand and started rolling. He started chasing the coin, but it didn't stop. Not knowing how far it was planning to roll, he continued chasing it. The coin was going to the swamp. He tried to catch it before it went into the water, but failed. He started looking for the coin in the water, but the moment he found it, a woman rose from the water. She turned her back and started walking on the water, leaving him in shock. The next day, Makio told the girls what happened the other day. Cher started teasing him while Jennifer was calm. She asked if he did something to make it resent to him, but he said he didn't. She responded that even if it resent him, it would calm down if he splashed holy water on it. Makio realized that Jennifer could make holy water. She started chanting something to a bottle of water and told him that it was done soon after. The chanting and gestures were refined, just like a real priestess, so Makio was impressed. After that, he put the gold coin in the holy water for purification. That day, they tried to restore the cave. Makio was in charge of the heavy lifting, Cher cleaning, and Jennifer was washing the dishes. Most of the food was destroyed, so Makio was a little upset. Jennifer called for him to show PJ's armor. It didn't even have a single scratch on it. She said that it might be made of adamantite. It was an incredibly hard metal. Sometimes the performance of the armor was so good that comrades even fought amongst each other for it. But PJ seemed like a lone wolf type, and it seemed like he didn't have any companions. Cher called Makio because she thought the floor had collapsed. It seemed to have collapsed from the attack of a giant magical beast. Even though the base was not in perfect shape, it seemed like it was about to activate. Since it was dangerous, he told the girls to not use that room for now. That night, the gold coins he purified started moving again, and he told Jennifer that it didn't seem like the holy water was working. The coin managed to leave the bottle, and he thought it was calling the elf spirit again. He really didn't like it, but it was troublesome to do that every night. He had no choice but to make it stop. He had gone even further into the swamp than yesterday. When he went quite far, he wondered if he could even get back safely. He suddenly stepped on something and heard a noise. A voice came from underneath the dried leaves. He stepped on it again and heard the voice again. There was someone under the bushes. He cleaned up the leaves and saw the elf from yesterday. It was confirmed that she wasn't a ghost, so he wondered if she was a zombie. She opened her eyes and wanted his help, saying that she was alive. The gold coin had stopped moving. He had her drink the water inside the bottle just in case. She stood up and apologized. Makio asked where she came from, and she responded that she was from the country of elves. Her name was Helgen Toulon, and she wanted to be called Heli. Makio introduced himself as the landlord of the magical realm. She looked exhausted, so he offered her to come to his house for the time being. While shaking, she accepted his offer and explained that she was swallowed by the ground and couldn't move. She searched for other living beings with her spirit, but fortunately the landlord found her, so she was pretty grateful. Makio figured out that it was Heli's projection that was sent through spiritualism yesterday. She had a physical form, so he wasn't scared anymore. With Makio's support, they started walking. He noticed something on her shoulder and asked if she was injured. That seemed to be a mark cut by a knife. He realized that the mark on her shoulder was a slave magic circle. He asked if she was an escaped slave, and she stated that she had never been anyone's slave. She escaped because she was about to be convicted of a crime that would make her a slave. She hasn't committed any crimes, and they were planning to start a foolish war, so she tried to stop it. Makio thought it was considered treason and asked if she was a criminal slave once again. She got mad and told him that she had just fled from her country. She stated that she didn't intend to cause any trouble, and asked if he could let her stay here for a while. Realizing that he might just have a new roommate, he asked if she could pay rent. They returned to the cave, and Heli introduced herself to the girls in a bossy manner. She was quite surprised to see a demon there. Makio wondered why the troublemakers always gather in the demon world. He had never imagined that this elf would bring so much trouble. At that time, he didn't even consider it. The team was out of wheat and had to eat a plain meal this time. Makio was wondering if that giant monster washed everything. Jennifer suggested going to the training ground to trade things. They started discussing what they should have brought with them when they left. Makio said almost all of their food and weapons were ruined. Jennifer suggested making wands, as they were the easiest and they could also use monster furs and potion ingredients. Makio asked her if she ever studied pharmacology, which she studied only a bit. She said she just studied the things that could be sold at the market. Then Cher suggested making elf potions. They all looked at Heli, and Makio asked her if she could make elf potions, such as healing potions. She smirked as it wasn't a big deal for her, and she would make them as compensation for the rent. She started ordering around to gather ingredients for potions right away, but the girls wasn't even bothered to go with her, so Makio had to escort Heli. The moment Heli stepped outside of the cave, Makio found her surrounded by scorpions. Makio caught them and asked her if she was still alive. She was in blood and sweat, so he turned back to make a plan. Makio told Cher to come with him to gather magic stones for the wands and told Jennifer to gather plants that were edible and useful materials near the cave. Then they turned to Heli and wanted her to make potions from the materials they had gathered. She was ashamed, but there was nothing to do. As everybody understood the assignments, they all started working. Due to the presence of the giant monster, Makio noticed that their encounters with other monsters had significantly decreased. He began to wonder if they should have focused more on gathering a larger quantity of magic stones rather than hunting for rare ones. Later that night, Jennifer was pleasantly surprised by the amount of arachne silk they had found, knowing it would fetch a good price in trade. Makio agreed. noting that they had indeed had a successful haul this time. Heli informed them that she had finished preparing the healing potions, but she needed to leave the medicinal herbs to rest for a while longer to properly assess their quality. Makio, however, warned Heli that if she failed to meet her rent obligations, she would be evicted without hesitation. Afterward, Makio and Cher decided to head to the training facility, leaving Jennifer and Heli in charge. He instructed them to take care of things while they were away. On the way to the training facility, Makio thought this time they needed to ask for more goods as they needed flour and vegetables. With the number of people increasing, they also needed construction tools. When they arrived, Makio thought something felt off since he was hearing shouts and screams. He thought that they were doing the combat training but was puzzled to see a woman among them. The captain welcomed them and they greeted each other. Makio asked what was with all the commotion. He said they were in the process of calming down the slaves right now and told him not to worry. More importantly, he asked him if he was there to talk about the war. Makio was unaware of the ongoing war and explained that he had ended up there because of a disaster in the Demon Land, where everything had been swept away. He then asked the captain if he was open to making a trade. The captain agreed, and Makio presented the Arachne silk, a rare and valuable item. The captain offered to trade the silk for food, saws, hammers, and needles, which Makio found to be a perfect exchange. However, the captain mentioned that there was something important he needed to discuss about the Demon Land. He asked Makio if he remembered the civil war that had taken place in East Kenya. The captain then revealed that a noblewoman warrior had come to purchase wands from the Demon Land. He explained that the territory governed by this noblewoman was East Kenya, and that the country of the elves had intervened in the civil war between nobles and adventurers. To confirm, Makio asked if the elves had invaded East Kenya. The captain responded that the elves claimed that they were reclaiming their ancestral land, and it was a different era now. Makio recalled that Heli had wanted to stop the war in the elven country. Makio wanted to state that the people living there were already different. The captain said that was why the elves were driven back quickly, but in the fight against the elves, adventurers gained more military merit than the nobles. Many nobles lost their status in the battle. Makio asked if that was possible, but it was a combative land, so the strong tended to sway the public opinion. Makio asked if it was the adventurers who ruled the land now. It wasn't. The nobles who investigated the adventurers were ruling the territory now, but the captain said he wasn't entirely sure about that. He said those nobles had started to claim the Demon Land as their territory, and they probably knew about his wand's power and wanted to keep it for themselves. Makio was not pleased by what he was hearing. He showed the document about how he was the landlord of the territory, but the captain told him that the one issued by the real estate agent didn't have much legal effect. Without the Estonian royal family's signature, he might have even lost in court. He said that for a long time the Demon Land had been a gray area in that territory, which was beneficial for other neighboring countries, but it was better if his land stayed as his. Makio asked if that meant that he was on their side, and he said he was, in a way. He said they were the royal army, but East Kenya was part of the Estonian kingdom, and if East Kenya rebelled against the royal family, they could take action. Makio realized that the army had issues of its own. He wanted to be sure that Makio knew that someone was trying to target his Demon Land. Makio said he understood and asked if it was okay to just chase them away if someone came. The captain nodded him, and he was concerned that the issue could get complicated, so he said he would contact the central office to send official documents proving that the land belonged to him. Meanwhile, the captain brought a slave woman and wanted to give her to Makio as an appreciation gift for always trading with them. He asked Makio if he could have taken that slave to the Demon Land. He said he could treat her however he liked, and she was sent there by the new lord of East Kenya. He was aware that having a woman in the facility was troublesome, as it always led to various problems. Makio said since the current lord sent her, it meant she was a former noble, so putting her in the Demon Land might have caused unnecessary trouble. He said she was no longer a noble, she was just a slave. Makio looked at her closely and realized that she was the one who had come to buy wands, and she had changed her hairstyle a bit. Cher told Makio that the demon territory was in ruins, so they needed all the help they could get. The woman was also surprised to see him and then noticed that the person in disguise, Cher, was the demon. While she was about to shout it, Makio grabbed her and said he would take her. They left there to stop her from revealing Cher's identity. When they turned back, Heli asked Makio who she was. He said she was a slave and he brought her back. She woke up, raised her head, and saw an elf standing in front of her. She was so angry that without thinking, she attacked her. Makio tried to separate them and told them to try to get along with each other as fellow slaves. They both yelled that they weren't slaves. He could care less about that and warned them that if they fight or fail to pay rent, they would be kicked out. While they were glaring at each other in a hostile way, Makio decided to go build a house with Cher. The next day, while Jennifer was preparing the food, Heli and the other slave, Sylvia, asked if she could make the vegetable seasoning taste stronger. Makio was surprised that they seemed to be getting along well. For that day's hunt, they planned to gather food and materials. They were all happy to hear that. While fighting with monsters, Makio watched Sylvia and realized that she seemed capable of fighting well enough by herself. Meanwhile, Heli was about to be eaten by a huge turtle. Cher chanted some magic to attack the turtle, and after her, Makio cut the turtle's head with his sword. Heli collapsed on the ground safely, but Sylvia was covered with the turtle's blood. Makio told Cher to take Sylvia to the river to wash up. Also, he wanted her to find some new clothes. Heli said she got some blood on her too, and she would join them. In the meantime, Makio made Hei's turtle soup. Suddenly, Cher came there and called out to him. She found a 5-horse carcass and a saddle. They thought someone might have ridden it there. Jennifer told Makio there were 2 more 5-horse carcasses over there, as well as a bag, weapons, and bloodstains nearby. Makio thought it could have been an intruder and searched the bag. There was a letter inside the bag, and before he could read it, the others realized there was a Vespa hornet nest on top of them. He thought it looked like whoever was riding that horse had been turned into meatballs. Heli asked him what he was going to do. He said they couldn't be saved at this point and decided to go back and eat. Makio realized that Heli was covered in tattoos, but she corrected him that they were actually curses. Those tattoos were what sealed the curse within her, and because of that curse, she could hardly use magic. Then she confessed that she couldn't use magic at all. Jennifer found it interesting. Makio told her that if it didn't cause any problems in her daily life, it was fine. He said that as the landlord, he had no problem with who she was, as long as she continued to make valuable potions. She asked if they were afraid of her curse. Cher wasn't at all and confessed that she was also cursed by the Demon King's lineage. Sylvia said that she also couldn't use a lot of magic either, and she could only cast a spell that prevented pain or one that temporarily broke limits. While the girls were talking, Makio realized that there were no rules for being in the demon land. Makio was holding the letter he found in the bag. While on their way home, he crumpled the letter in one hand and continued walking after the girls. It was written that the letter was about an order to leave the territory. Makio didn't show it to anyone and didn't mention the letter at all. They all walked back home. In the next scene, Heli wakes him up. She informed him that Cher taught her to use sap from the yassi tree as a material for the medicine jars, and if there was something that could harden that quickly, then he should have told her. He responded that the material melts when in contact with heat, so he thought it would be better to properly make the jar with clay. Deciding to try different things, she turned her back and started walking away. He stopped her and asked if she had come to his room in the morning just to tell him that. She said that Cher and she saw something strange at the Western Creek. It was a zombie. They immediately went to see it, and it was true. It was moving with just the upper body. It didn't seem harmful, but just in case, he thought about burning it or burying it. Jennifer realized that she had defeated that zombie once before. It was the only zombie she could defeat in the demon land. Makio seemed confused, so she reminded him of the gold coin that she picked off of this zombie. He said that if the zombie virus spreads, it would become troublesome, so he told Cher to burn the zombie with magic. Heli asked what the deal was with the gold coin, and he responded that it was the old gold coin that the zombie had that led him to her. After hearing that, Heli lost her temper and yelled at him for not saying that earlier. If that was the case, the zombie could be an elf adventurer. This corpse was rotten and missing its ears, making it pretty difficult to clearly identify. However, it might be Heli's predecessor who came to explore the demon land. Back at home, Heli examined the gold coin and concluded that whoever the owner of this gold coin might be, it didn't feel like a fake or an imitation. She asked if the zombie was found in Midgard. Makio asked if Midgard was the name of a city. She said that it was, and explained that it was the name of the city of the magical kingdom. Everyone, from children to the elderly, could use magic, and it was said to be more developed than any other country due to its magic tools. It also traded with the Elven country, but records of it disappeared long ago. Sylvia recalled reading about that in a history book. Heli asked where was that history book, and Makio responded that if she was talking about that book, then it was the one he got from her. He told them to wait, and he brought the book. The book said that the demon land used to be a country, but suddenly people started to disappear. The floating island was devoured by a giant magical beast, and there was a religion where deer were considered messengers of the god. That was mainly what was written there. Meanwhile, PJ's book described the ruins. They noticed the note on the last page and asked whose notebook it was. Makio responded that it was from a man who lived in this cave, and he was already reduced to bones when he found him. However, he mentioned that Cher and he found that floating island in the sky, and Peter Jefferson's grave was there. Heli asked if he was saying that PJ died on the island, but the notebook was held by someone else. That was exactly what he thought too. Looking closely, the handwriting on the last page and the letters accompanying the doodle magic circle were different from each other. In other words, the notebook was written by 2 authors. That was highly possible, but it seemed neither of them could solve the mystery of the demon land. Heli said that if they include her elven predecessor, that makes 3. To sum up all the information, she stated that it was certain that the magical kingdom, Yggdrasil, existed in the demon land. About the disasters and God's messenger deer described in this history book, she remembered reading about them in the elven country. Cher mentioned that among demons, deers were the messengers of devils. Makio thought Yggdrasil might have been hostile to demons from across the sea. There were so many questions in Heli's head, so she informed Makio that she could not leave this place until she solved the mystery of the demon land. Jennifer and Sylvia also seemed pretty into this topic. Makio reminded them once again that even if they found ruins, he was still the landlord, so anyone who tried to hoard the treasure would get kicked out. Thus, the mystery of the demon land remained, and everyday life continued. Heli and Cher made a kiln, and Jennifer cleaned and made baskets. As for Sylvia, she wanted to make weapons and armor using monster materials. Makio was surprised that she could make those, but she corrected him that she just wanted to try making them. They had plenty of material, so she could make various things, and she could pay her rent with that too. Even though she was inexperienced with that, she came up with very good stuff. Since then, Sylvia has become the demon land's armorer. One day she asked Makio to teach her how to fight, but he refused her because he thought he wasn't strong enough to teach others. He asked if survival skills in the demon land were okay with her, and she said that she wouldn't mind whatever it was. They started with a big bear monster. The skin was so hard that Sylvia's attacks were not effective. Meanwhile, Makio was watching her and thought that her fundamentals weren't bad, but then realized that she wasn't as good as he thought. He advised her to observe the weak points more carefully. Sylvia was confused because in the end she defeated it. Makio explained that if she realized an attack wasn't effective immediately, she must think of another method. She should get better at switching tactics and observation. Sylvia was impressed and asked where he learned to fight. He only took courses at the Adventurers Guild, and everything else he learned was through experience in the demon land. She found it difficult to believe him, but he explained that his knowledge came from keen observation. He noted that once you become accustomed to observing a target, you can start to predict its movements. He added that bones can bend inward but not outward, so escaping the attack range was also a tactic. She could learn a lot from even dismantling. As for the next lesson, he told her that when she found an unfamiliar fruit in the demon land, she first tested it to see if it was poisonous by applying it to her skin. Jennifer didn't listen to him and ate it right away, causing her mouth to burst into flames because of the spice. Once again, everyone's lives in the demon land continued like that. Then one day during lunch, they heard a scream from the West River. Cher and Makio went to see the screams while the others were ordered to stay at home. There were lots of dead people. After checking them, Cher stated that they were all drowned. Cher also noticed that they had marks on them. She seemed worried that the demon land could be under attack. They didn't know if they were being invaded and couldn't even ask them as they were all dead. She suggested finding someone who wasn't dead. After a while, they found another one, but she was dead too. If they leave them, they will become zombies again, and that would be troublesome. She asked if they should show them to the captain. That was a good idea. Before that, he decided to check if Jennifer and the others knew anything about them. Sylvia was shocked when she saw the tattoo. She said that the tattoo was from an assassination group from the church, the 16 of Hassises. Jennifer heard about them but wasn't sure if they really existed. Makio was puzzled, so Sylvia explained that when her father was threatened by the church long ago, she heard their name. It was said that if someone with the crescent moon and cross tattoo shows up, they must abandon the house and flee. Makio started freaking out about them and asked so many questions. Heli asked why there were even assassins in the demon land. Even though there were a variety of people on the team, no one had any idea. Makio decided to leave it to the military, as they could not handle such a matter. He decided to go to the captain's place, so everyone else should stay behind. The captain was shocked to see the 16 of Hassis. Makio preserved them in sap and explained that when he found them, they were already dead. This situation was a bit tricky. For now, he accepted to take care of the bodies, but he needed to contact the central authorities to get accurate information. Makio wasn't interested in finding out who they were. He was worried their comrades might come back for revenge if they found their dead bodies in the demon land. He asked if there was a bad rumor about the demon land and if such people were coming. The captain stated that there was something he wanted to talk to him about. It was about the ownership of the demon land he mentioned before. The certificate would arrive there in about 3 days, and after that, the demon land would be part of his territory. Makio was thrilled to hear that news, but he did not expect the captain to congratulate him for becoming a noble. The captain explained that it was a given considering the size of the territory, or rather, they needed him to take on the role. Putting that aside for now, he told him that within the next 3 days, the private soldiers and adventurers of East Kenya might invade the demon land. Until it officially becomes his territory, the military there cannot act against any invasion either. In other words, it was the perfect time for them to invade. So, for the next 3 days until the documents arrived, he told him to somehow protect the demon land by himself. Makio tried to object to this matter, but he told him to consider it a preliminary battle for becoming a noble. This was where he needed to hold out. Even if he said that they were counting on him, he was still uneasy about that. He asked how many of them would be there. Considering the defenses of East Kenya, the captain estimated that there would be about 1,000 or 2,000. Makio knew they were doomed because there were only 5 people including himself. He had no idea how they were supposed to defend against them. The captain continued and stated that if East Kenya gained any more power, it could lead to a full-scale war with the Elven Kingdom, and that was something that they must prevent. Becoming a noble didn't matter to him, but he didn't want to give up this place, so he promised to do his best to protect his land. After he finished his meeting with the captain, he returned to the Demon Land and explained to the girls that they were being invaded by East Kenya, and they must do something about it. He planned to set traps using the terrain. 5 people facing off against an army of 2,000 head-on wouldn't even count as a battle. Cher was all fired up and ready to fight, while Sylvia was anxious about the revenge battle. Jennifer and Heli were just thinking about what a drag it was to deal with them. But even if they complained, the enemy would still come, so they didn't wait any longer to start setting up the pit traps. Seeing everyone digging holes, Heli thought they were out of the Stone Age now. Makio asked if she had any other ideas, but she didn't respond. Instead, Cher suggested making the holes using magic. Makio refused to do them with magic, but when Cher insisted on it, he decided to give it a try. The result was so spectacular that they were all shocked. Jennifer had never seen magic like that before. Saliva asked what kind of magic this was. Makio explained that it wasn't magic. He just found the rising force and interfered with using magic, which wasn't difficult for him. Cher didn't really get it, but she said that if he could find the energy, then that meant he could create magic. When she said that, the girls were all surprised, while Makio was puzzled. Heli realized that he had completely created magic on his own terms. She couldn't believe she was witnessing a scene where magic was created. Cher added that Makio creates magic based on his imagination alone while disregarding things like structure. Makio was still confused because he thought magic was something you were supposed to test out and practice. Jennifer replied that normally he would learn how to chant spells first, to just find out if you could do it or not. He stated that he couldn't do that, and even the village elders said that he didn't have a talent for magic. Now that they knew he could create magic without chanting or anything, they simply concluded that he was a weirdo. Assuming that they accept he was, Heli said it was important how they used that ability to their advantage. She asked if he could change the terrain to create a maze. Makio thought it would be meaningless if they could bypass it, but she corrected him that even a simple hill could make a big difference, but only if there were a lot. For instance, they could make them cross several hills to reach the cave, lead the route, and set traps in the valleys. Just being in a high place already gave them an advantage in battle. After listening to her closely, Makio changed his mind and believed that this might work. He would also prefer to avoid direct combat if possible. Sylvia suggested luring the monsters with blood and fresh meat and then making them fight with the enemy. That could be done immediately. He asked if there were any other ideas, and Cher suggested magic circles. She already tried many magic circles in PJ's notebook. Makio seemed interested in that idea because it would be more effective if they created explosive magic circles on the hills they made. Jennifer stated that if they were camping in a large group, he would want to disrupt their supply lines. He asked if they should poison their food, and Heli responded that there were already swamp flowers buried for potions in the ground, which should be ripe by now. She suggested making simple pots using palm sap because they melt quickly in fire and are easily disposable. Concluding that, Makio started to feel like they might have a chance to win. Without waiting any longer, they started preparing. With that, the greatest operation in the Demon Land was about to begin. When they finished all the preparations, Makio suggested eating something first. While eating, Heli heard the sound of drums even from a distance. With a nervous voice, Sylvia wondered if they were here. Even though they could not see the scattered troops yet, he was sure they were being motivated for battle, which he was confused about. Jennifer asked if 2,000 people could fill this plain even if they passed through the forest. Makio decided to evacuate to the top of the hill for now and warned them not to step on the magic circles no matter what. 1 hour later, they reached the top, but there was a problem: they were not coming. Heli said faint screams and sounds of battle could be heard, so they might be fighting monsters in the forest across the stream. Sylvia concluded that it should be difficult to move around in the forest with so many people. They might even die before reaching the Demon Land. It seemed like they were struggling in the forest near the Demo Land. Jennifer and Cher got bored and decided to go and bake bread in the cave as they waited. Eventually, nothing happened that day, so they decided to return to the cave. While eating dinner, Makio asked if it was like that when East Kenya was invaded. Sylvia said it wasn't. There were multiple traders within the castle, and many were bribed with money. Heli thought there might be a few traders here too. She then refused her idea out loud, confusing everyone. Makio remembered that he hadn't mentioned that when the battle was over, he might become a noble. While everyone was surprised, Cher and Heli didn't seem to like that idea, and Heli stated that it was better not to, because he would end up associating with unreliable people. He wondered if Helgen was a noble too. He asked if anyone there had ever been a noble, and the result surprised him. Everyone was a noble once except Jennifer, who seemed uncomfortable about this. He asked what being a noble meant. They started listing stuff such as managing their own territory, making lots of babies, and risking their lives for the country. Makio stated that he wanted to know the practical aspects. They said that there was infrastructural development and trade with other territories, and there was also daily training along with studying war tactics. They didn't seem to be so helpful, so he decided to research it himself one day. Even as night fell, there was no sign of an enemy invasion. They rotated people to keep guard, which allowed the others to sleep. The next morning, Makio woke up to an explosion sound. He asked if that was one of the magic circles set on the hill, and Sylvia confirmed it. They got ready and immediately went to see the circle. What they saw was just a big wild boar caught in the trap. As they cannot leave corpses lying around, he decided to scatter them elsewhere since they cannot be helped. Suddenly, he saw Cher right next to him standing there. She pointed somewhere and stated that they were here, at the borders of the demon land, across the stream. The soldiers were cutting the trees around the stream. Makio was confused, so Sylvia explained that they were planning to build a bridge to cross over. Jennifer and Heli brought smoked meat and nuts. Cher asked what they should do, and he responded that they were going to wait. If something dangerous were to happen, then they would use the monsters. But for now, it was best to just prepare for a barbecue. Jennifer was surprised that he was planning to barbecue at a time like this. Cher explained to her that the smell would attract the monsters. Meanwhile, the soldiers created the bridge, and their captain ordered them to charge into battle. Once they were in the forest, they were going to split up and advance in teams. The moment they started running across the bridge, the slimes attacked them. After they managed to get rid of them, they encountered another group of monsters and then another. Without resting, the soldiers continued their way, but then they ended up falling to the traps they prepared for them. When the monster attacks didn't stop, their captain ordered them to stop and decided to burn them with magic. When Makio and the girls noticed that their commander was a magician, Heli stated that if they killed him, they should be able to end the invasion. Makio wasn't sure if they should try that, but Heli was sure about it. She took out her bow and arrow, and while the commander was chanting his magic spells, she shot him with the arrow. Makio was happy, but she stated that she missed the target. As the soldiers were trying to figure out where the enemy was, the commander ordered them to protect him with their lives. When he got enough soldiers surrounding him, he said that he was going to retreat to the other side of the river and told them to continue advancing without rest. Suddenly, a man with a beard appeared beside the stream. He seemed to have a team with him. Makio figured that they were adventurers. Sylvia was shocked to see them because they were her father's enemies, the main force of the rebellion army. The captain of the adventurer team was informed that the soldiers couldn't move forward with those traps and monsters everywhere. The girl next to him splashed a bucket of monster blood on the soldiers, and the leader stated that he wouldn't allow any of them to retreat. The other team members took out their weapons and told them to hurry up and go. Makio was watching them, and he could see the soldiers' demeanor had changed. They were being killed easily by the beasts that were lured by the blood. On top of that, they were falling victim to the man-eating plants. He wondered what their true purpose was. The leader stated that if there were traps, they would trigger every single one of them because they were here to create a safe route for infiltration. That was their purpose. The soldiers were all sure that they could not possibly kill those monsters, but they had to follow the order to head for the hill. One by one, they continued to die, whether it was because of a trap or a monster. Makio and the girls continued observing them. The fact that they were using their soldiers as pawns made them realize that they had no right to survive. In any case, with their overwhelming numbers, they would eventually reach the hill where they were standing. He decided to change the plans and do their best to win this war. Sylvia stated that they were the ones who killed her father, so she wanted to finish them off herself. Even though Makio understood how she felt, this was an impossible request. She was better off not doing that because it was obvious that this man was strong. He had never seen anyone with such a sinister aura before, and he doubted she could win against him by herself. And the plan had gone completely awry. That being said, he wanted everyone to move according to the new plan right away. Cher, Jennifer, and Helgen left the hill to do their duties, but Sylvia didn't seem so happy about all this. Makio noticed her and reminded her that if she didn't move according to the plan, it would cause trouble for everyone. But Sylvia had an idea. Meanwhile, the girls brought a carriage full of monster meat. Makio told them to move it to the south side of the hill. They planned to create a C-shaped passage to the south side by raising the terrain. Then they were going to scrape the food at a dead end. This would cause all kinds of monsters to show up. The plan worked just as he thought. Green tigers, armies, Golden bats and forest giants all got drawn by the smell and came there. Now it was about the timing. He asked Heli how the enemies were doing, and she responded that soldiers that were covered in blood were running around deep within the forest, and there were frequent explosions from the soldiers falling into the traps, but that was not going to last much longer, as she said. They were running out of the traps they had prepared beforehand. The pitfalls were filling up with soldiers, and there weren't any explosives left on the hill. The final destination was a field of swimming flowers. The surviving soldiers were probably asleep by now, but Makio was still nervous because of that adventurer group. Thanks to the soldiers' sacrifice, they had created a safe path for themselves. He ordered the others to not let their guard down and look for any monsters or plants. Meanwhile, Cher was preparing herself for Makio's signal. Jennifer was amazed that she was harnessing incredible magic power. Makio watched the adventure team from a safe distance, and when he decided that it was time, he cut off their escape route. He seemed a bit relieved to do that, even though he had used up quite a bit of magic power. Seeing the signal in the sky, Cher started the process and created fire to make the monsters gather in one place. Makio started running to the hill and checked the monsters which were gathered. Jennifer called him, and he used his magic to reopen parts of the passage and make them kill the rest of the army and the adventurer team. Even the leader was shocked to see so many monsters chasing them. The strongest trap in the demon land was the magical beasts themselves, so Makio was counting on them. There were too many of them, so the leader decided to retreat to the river for now. However, before they could do that, they faced a wall that was covering their escape route. The monsters were close, and they started to get eaten by them one by one. The archer girl told the leader to run, even if it was just him, and started attacking them. The only paths left were to either fight the hordes of monsters or use the hole they deliberately left open that could only fit one person. They had no choice but to escape from there. When the leader went to the other side of the wall, using the hole, he encountered Makio. When he asked who he was, Makio responded that what he was doing was illegal trespassing and ordered him to leave immediately. This was enough for him to figure out that he was the master of the demon land. He thought it would be over when he killed him and immediately went to attack. But while dodging his attacks, Makio tried to stop him and requested that he listen to him first. Of course, he didn't listen and continued to attack, making him realize how strong he was. Makio solidified his arm with earth magic and started defending himself. He then used wind magic to slightly deflect the tip and jump on the other side of him. The leader was confused by his strange techniques. He wondered if his magic could hold out. What was more concerning for him was that he hadn't shown any signs of attacking. He was only defending. While wondering about that, he had an idea. To confirm it, he threw a rock right in front of Makio and made the trap show. Makio's plan was to lead him into the pitfalls while battling. But when he looked closely, he could see the trap, so he was pretty confident and had nothing to fear. He was about to make his last attack, but before he could even touch Makio, Sylvia jumped out of one of the traps and defeated the man who killed her father right away. Now that it was over, Makio let himself breathe for a moment. After that, he caught the magician commander and asked if he still wanted to fight. In exchange for returning the wounded and the dead, they promised to never interfere with the demon realm again, and in a panic they fled. Thus, the war between the demon land and East Kenya came to an end. After handling the aftermath of the battle, a few days later they headed to the military training facility to report. They received words of admiration and gratitude from the captain, and the official document stating the ownership of the demon land had also arrived. Jennifer wondered if he had to go all the way to the capital for him to become a noble, and he responded that the ceremony he had to go to was there. But even if there was a ceremony, it was just the king putting a sword on his shoulder and appointing him. The trip to the capital was going to take 10 days, so he left the house to the girls while he was gone. He departed for the capital early the next morning, and during his absence it seemed that various thoughts were swirling among the remaining 4. With that, time passed normally. After the ceremony, he asked an old man if he could get some sausage and bread. The man noticed his luggage and asked where he was going. He responded that he was going to the noble land. This made the man laugh because it was a dangerous place. He then remembered that there was a noble in the demon land and asked him if he was planning to serve that noble. Makio responded that he was, in fact, that noble. The man didn't believe him because it wasn't right for a noble to leave without a carriage or an escort. Makio responded that running was much faster, and he started running. On his way, he was thinking about the image of the demon realm. He also thought about the mystery of PJ that was waiting to be solved. There were so many things to do for him. When he arrived, he asked the girls if there were any problems while he was away. The girls were all very happy to see him and had been eagerly waiting for his return. Makio was delighted to receive such a warm welcome from his friends. That is the end of the complete manga. Thank you for watching.